This is Clay Jenkinson, out of character, not in the barn, in our studio in downtown Bismarck, and the semi-permanent guest host of the Jefferson Hour, David Swenson, is across from me.
I am.
One quick question. What happened to your sign, semi-permanent guest host?
Oh, it's here.
It's on your
But I don't leave it out.
Oh, you don't?
I only bring it out.
It's in a safety deposit
when
box.
we're at the barn or here doing a show.
I see. All right.
You can't use these things just willy-nilly. There must be.
It's ceremonial. Absolutely.
It's like you putting your tights on.
A very nice listener who felt, I think, that
we should have his name, but I don't.
He sent that office plaque to you to make sure that you were getting proper respect as the semi-permanent guest host.
And on that note, someone wrote in, I should have that letter in front of me too. I do, and I'll find it. Someone wrote in, because after the episode was broadcast that the sign was awarded to me, and you made a deal out of it.
I said I didn't get a sign.
Yeah, you took a photograph of me.
I did, yes.
And this gentleman that wrote in said he had searched the website and could not find the photograph. So, of course, our webmaster put it up, and later informed me that it had more hits than anything that had appeared on Facebook.
You're the number one hit?
I have trouble believing that, but it was like, I don't get out much. I just as soon remain anonymous, and there I was.
Well, the radio is a magical thing.
I was quite touched.
So I remember when I first heard Rush Limbaugh. This would be in the 1990s sometime. And he has this very sonorous...
Yes, he does, yeah.
Has a great voice. And back then he played himself more egotistically than he has since become. He played... he could say, "Talent on loan from God," and speaking with one half of my mind tied behind my back, and so on. And he played a character. He still does, of course. We all do, but he played a character that was much more full of personality and ego than he has since done. And I remember wondering, what does he look like? I wonder, what does Rush Limbaugh look like? I think we feel that of all...
I think I know where you're going there.
We feel that of all radio people. That I remember once my daughter had there was a radio host in Idaho that my daughter just loved, and she said she must be the most beautiful woman in the world because her voice is so seductive and so beautiful. And I said, don't ever look her up. Don't ever try to find out what she actually looks like, because that's the magic of radio, is that every listener gets to project onto that voice an idea of who that person is. And then when you meet them, and this happens to me all the time, you are almost invariably a little startled that an actual human being is the person behind that persona. And so I think what you've done here is that you have outed yourself. No. People have wanted for years to know, is there a David Swenson, and B, what does he look like?
I did not out myself.
Your son.
We're wasting way too much time on this, although I must say I was touched, and it was very nice.
But anyway, first
a lot of really nice
First you
comments.
Got the sign.
Yeah.
Then the photo was posted.
Yeah.
And now you're the number one, you've gone viral.
Well,
in the Jefferson Hour world,
yeah, which is a
small world,
a small world and a sort of
after all
specific. But the reason
this is 1776 Club additional matter.
You came down here on a Saturday to help me with something, and I so appreciate that.
Always glad to do.
As long as we both had a few more minutes, we don't. Maybe we don't. Maybe we do. We thank our 1776 Club members enough. Because we so appreciate their support.
It's very important. We created this not only because the funding is important to us to keep the Jefferson Hour alive and growing, but also as a way of creating a kind of a community within the community. And we wanted to provide extra content to the people that so generously have joined the 1776 Club. And I feel we don't actually get enough opportunities to do that. And so I suggested this today, David, because
you did.
I wanted to lay down some some discourse with you in advance of an interview that I'm going to be doing next week in Walpole, New Hampshire, with the great documentary filmmaker Ken Burns.
And is my job as the what is it? Anyway.
Wow, semi-permanent guest host.
Anyway, I must ask for some backstory for people who don't know.
Well, Ken Burns is America's greatest documentary filmmaker.
Oh, in relation, everybody knows that, but in relation to you. Now, we did talk to Joseph Ellis about this a couple of times.
And I met him so Ken Burns has made a lot of films.
Your first involvement was the Jefferson.
Right, so I actually this was during the 250th anniversary of Jefferson's birth, and there were a series of programs done around the country, and I was asked to go to the San Francisco Opera House to do a performance as Thomas Jefferson. This was 1993, so a very long time ago, and Ken Burns' producer was there because she was they were about to do a documentary film on Jefferson, and so she wanted to listen to all of the day-long activities. And afterwards she said, "You've got to meet Ken. I want you to be in his film." And so I was, of course, thrilled. And I got this summons. You kind of get summoned. And
back then he wasn't.
He had done the Civil War, and he had done
was
baseball.
Something, yeah. Now he's become an institution.
He's iconic, and there's a Ken Burns effect on your MacBook Pro when you edit video. But,
that's right.
But so I was summoned, and I went, and scared to death. And I remember staying in a beautiful bed and breakfast in this picturesque little village, Walpole, New Hampshire.
How big is that?
It's a couple of thousand people, but it has a town square and white clapboard steepled churches and historic homes, just exactly what you would expect. It's like a Currier and Ives illustration with young people skating on a pond in the winter. And
so you must have been a bit nervous.
More than a bit. I was terrified.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what to expect. And this was my first time being in a documentary film.
And that film, for those
1998,
it's still available. There. It's out there. Yeah.
So I went there and I was interviewed by him, and you come away from one of these interviews just thinking, what a moron I am. I don't deserve to even be alive.
Again, the backstory, you have told this to me, and I've listened with great interest, how it actually happens. I mean, people that watch it just see clips picked of you, but you sit down in a chair.
They don't send you any advance memo. They just say, you're going to talk about Jefferson. That's it. That's all you know. You get there and you don't know what to expect. And he lives in a village. It's not like a studio.
Yeah.
It's his house.
Yeah.
And there's a little anteroom that has kind of blonde wood, and you go in and there's a microphone, and you sit down. And they hook it up to you, and then he comes in. All this is done. They kind of look at your hair and say, maybe you should brush it this way. And they put a little powder on your nose, and Ken will be here anymore. Ken's coming, And then eventually the door opens, and in walks this extraordinary human being, extraordinary in talent, extraordinary in breadth. And he has an extraordinary look. I mean, a physical look.
Extraordinary in conversation, too.
And he comes in, and then he shakes your hand, and he says, "Are you ready to go?" And that's it. There's no briefing. And he sits down, and he is 2.5 feet from me. And so it's like you're at a small diner looking across the little table. And he's there, and the camera is not on his shoulder, but essentially it is. It's on a tripod, and it sits right above his shoulder.
So you have this huge lens right in your face, and Ken Burns.
And he's right in your face.
Right.
And there's some lights, and then there's a sound guy, and there 4 or 5 people in the room. And then he has a mesmerizing physical presence. This is what charisma means. And then he says, "So who's Thomas Jefferson?" And you go,
Well, now but people who would see this would realize that you didn't go.
Well, you start that way, and then you sort of, because you think he's going to say, "What was Jefferson's response to the French Revolution?" or "Tell us about the calendar clock at Monticello." But he doesn't. He wants to see its discovery, and as you know, we've made some documentary films together, you and I, and I've adopted that as a mechanism that you don't know what you're going to get. You want the person to tell you what the story is.
Well, in a good documentary, absolutely. It's a lot of people going with, and we've talked about this at length, but going with a preconceived idea of a story, and it's never.
That's a bad way to make film.
Well, but also there's just so many great stories that you will never get if you go in that way.
So after a few minutes, you sort of find your rhythm. You realize, I'm going to say what I can. And he asks follow-up questions, and then you move into, he asks specific questions about specific incidents in Jefferson's life. And the whole time you're thinking, I'm trying to take deep breaths and be present and be articulate and know the material and be factual, be compelling. You're also on camera, so you can't close your eyes and look down. You can't have notes. You have to look into his face and into the camera at all times. And this goes on for about 2 hours. And then he says, thank you very much. And you go have lunch, all of you. And then you drive back to the Boston or Hartford airport and fly away and think, I failed. You think that but I failed so badly that they're sorry they invited me.
Joe Ellis, in his upcoming episode, depending on when you listen to this, it talks about there were many historians that came in.
Well, see, then that's one part is the interviews, and those are one-on-one.
Right.
But then he also has a group of historical advisors.
Right.
I was one of them on that film, and Joe Ellis was another one. And then you come back a few months later, and he has the draft product, and you watch it. And in this little tiny editing booth, where the screen is maybe the size of a mid-size widescreen television.
Right. Well, to back up again and to help set that stage, he shoots film.
He still shoots film,
which is
nuts. But it's high quality, sensuous color. That's why he does it. He likes film.
That's a whole nother discussion. But the point is that
it's very complex.
It's different to say when somebody comes in here to watch a rough cut, we have a big screen and everybody sits around and looks at it. In film editing, it's a small booth.
Right.
And plus, when you're shooting, I'm assuming you shoot 15, 20 minutes and then stop.
Not
and
even. Every 8 or 9 minutes, they stop you and say, we re-rack. And then they
put fresh film in.
Whereas with video, you can run for a long time.
Hours.
So anyway, so then you come into the editing booth, and there are like 5 or 4 or 3 historical consultants, and then Ken Burns and his sound person and a couple of others, and you're all there in these chairs, and you watch the episode. And you see, there's Joseph Ellis, and then there's Andrew Burstein, and there's Merrill Peterson, and so on. And then suddenly, oh my goodness, that's me. And you see yourself, and you just cover your face and think, oh, God, no.
You're probably destroying this for a lot of people who have this. Clay Jenkinson.
No, but it's true. And Joseph Ellis was thinking this too. He's looking at himself and thinking, I can't believe I put it that way. It was really, so everyone feels that.
I'm sitting here. I'm gonna have to rack that show up and watch it again. It's been a while.
I was a child, and so then you watch it. So,
I don't think I was born.
But that's one. So that's and then at the end of each hour of the draft of the scratch video, the lights come up, and then he says, "All right, Joe, what did you think? Are there any errors here? Do we get our emphasis right? Are the visuals tracking?" And then Joe Ellis will give a 7-minute commentary and say, "I think get Jenkinson out of there. He's terrible," or whatever. so then each of us does that, and then Ken Burns, he's like a wizard. I mean, I've watched you do it. It's an amazing thing. So you have stills, you have archival video and film. You have music tracks, you have voice tracks, you have the actual interview, B-roll, and they're all kind of floating around in here. And then Ken Burns he doesn't take a single note. He's just listening to all of the advisors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, each one with different points of view. And no, you shouldn't have done this, or maybe more on that. And I think the music is too loud. He's listening to all this, just listening. And then he crosses his arms for a minute and he says, "Here's what we're going to do." He goes, "We're going to change this. We're going to add that. We're going to move this forward. We're going to take that back. That picture's no good. Let's get a different one." And I think we got too much of Joe there, but too little of Andrew Burstein there. I think when we did the actual interview, Burstein said another interesting thing about a minute later. Let's go find that and put that in here. And then I think I will go back, and I want a longer pause before. Let's put a 1.5 second pause between that statement and then the voice track of Jefferson. And you think, holy smoke, how can he do this? He's just like, and bang, bang, bang,
well,
bang.
That's an excellent description, and you know how he does it.
I've seen you do it.
Well, I've seen you do it too. But you have to have the capacity to, and the will to store all this stuff. And you're so good at this, to store it in your brain and be able to dial it up. And when you get into a process like that, that's it. That's what you live for.
But
that's all you do.
The person who watches it on television or watches it on a screen somewhere sees the story of Thomas Jefferson. But you, as the editor, the person who makes the film, or Ken Burns in this case, has to be thinking of all these different layers at once. And by changing, like just saying, you and I've done this, let's make that pause just a tiny bit longer before.
Oh, yeah.
And that can change the whole film.
Like 5 frames, yeah.
Right. And I mean, the whole feel of the film can change. Or that music's not quite right. Let's just have a low little sitar music here. Or music will ruin this piece. Or let's, how the Ken Burns effect, how he moves his camera across a photograph. Let's just linger on the face of Madison here for just a minute, because it'll help make sense of that statement that Joseph Ellis made about Jefferson's friendship with Madison. So the viewer doesn't understand any of this. The viewer just sees a product. But in the room, there are 15 or 20 or 30 things going on per minute, maybe per second. And as you know from making these films, we've done it, there are literally thousands, maybe tens of thousands of decisions that have to be made before you finally stamp the finished documentary.
And then you think of the running time of some of the projects he's done. The most recent one,
17 hours,
country music, and
so think of that. I mean, so when you and I make a film, we could spend a whole Saturday fixing a 7-minute segment of something.
Oh, easily, yes.
And then we both go away discontented. And then the next day you say, in my sleep, I thought of what to do about that. And then you fix it. But
that's it. You just live it. You have to live it.
To the listener is that these are very, very, very complex sets of decisions. There's no easy. It's not like when you make a home movie with iMovie and you just do the best you can in 2.5 hours or a day.
Or 10 minutes.
This is an incredibly nuanced, subtle, hundreds of tiny little decisions change the entire feel of the product. And he is, there are many, many, many great documentary filmmakers, more every day.
He's the guy.
But he's the dean. Yep. And of course it came about with the Civil War.
Right.
And he's been riding high. Some people think that Vietnam is his best film. Some people think that baseball is his best film. Some people think World War II is his best film. Nobody thinks that jazz is his best film. But it's good. And country music, I think you think highly of it.
Well, I've kind of parceled it out. What I've seen of it, the thing that just you and I do this so we watch it from a different perspective, and I'm thinking, man, to have a staff of
20
interns or whoever they are to
researchers,
go scour for materials and photograph and film, what a luxury.
And plus, David, if you and I made a film on Vietnam, we would call Harvard and call Stanford and and they would maybe cooperate with us.
That's where you're really good.
But when Ken Burns makes a call to Harvard, they take that call. So he has now. He can. So anyway,
But we need to also interject. The writing, and that's Dayton Duncan.
Well, it's sometimes Dayton Duncan, it's sometimes Jeffrey Ward, but there's a narrative.
Right.
And there's not only a narrative, there's a script. Mm-hmm. First we're going to talk about Jefferson's childhood, or we're going to start with the Sally Hemings crisis, and then we'll do the backstory. But there's an outline, there's a sense of how are you going to tell the story? What's the story, and how are you going to tell it? With a biopic, with a documentary about Jefferson, you in some sense you have to tell the story. He was born in such a place. He went to school. He became a young. You have to tell the story through in something like a linear narrative, and so certain elements that have to be there. But so much is in the details. And even as you know, you and I have had, and I mean this in the positive sense, but we've had big arguments about fonts. What's the font for the chapter headings, and you can get into a day-long discussion about this. So anyway, eventually there's a film, and it's released. In this case with Jefferson, the first one that I got to do with Ken Burns, I was not only a talking head for the first time ever, but I was also one of the historical advisors, which was a huge honor. With National Parks, which was the next one that I was in with him, I was just a talking head. And so that's even more nerve-wracking because you go do it, and it takes about a year and a half after you're interviewed before the product comes out.
Okay, so Jefferson, National Parks, what other ones?
Then Roosevelt.
Of
and
course.
a little tiny piece in Lewis and Clark.
And one of the reasons we're talking about this is that as you started, before I made you backstory a bit, is that you're going there again.
Yeah, I am, but I just want to say one more piece about this before
Certainly.
we get to Franklin and how to prepare. This is really about how do you prepare. So when he did the National Parks, I was interviewed, and a couple of things about that. One is Jefferson, in many respects, is the midwife to the National Park system. So I was, always working from kind of this same well, and I got to talk back to Ken Burns because if you remember, the theme, the title was The National Parks, America's Best Idea. So I get into the same thing. I'm summoned to Walpole. I come in. Now at least I know what I'm doing. There he is, 2.5 feet from me, a little grayer, but I'm a lot grayer. And he says, roll it. And then he says, so Clay, the National Parks, America's Best Idea? And I said, no.
I remember that.
No. The Declaration of Independence, the statement all men are created equal, the ideal of human aspiration that any human being deserves a central modicum of dignity and respect. That's America's best idea. I said, the National Parks, a great idea, one of the best, but no one can really say that's our best idea because it's the idea of America. And
that made it in the film.
And I thought he's going to say, "That's it, get out."
No,
really.
Course not.
No, he could have, but also I thought that's never getting in because I'm talking back to Ken Burns. I'm thwarting his thesis, but actually it makes the thesis stronger if you think about it. Because, but anyway, so I got to talk back to him. So then, but that's it. I'm not on the advisory board. So you go away, you live your life for 1 year, 2 years, whatever it is, and suddenly
then you get a phone call. Hey, I saw you on TV.
No, it's even better. So Bismarck. I was living in North Dakota by now. So Bismarck State College worked with PBS to premiere a version of the film in an auditorium, the Sidney J. Lee Auditorium, and I'm invited to come and maybe make a remark afterwards, but I have no idea what this is. I mean, absolutely none. And I have no idea that I'm in it. No one's ever said a word to me since the moment I left Walpole, New Hampshire. And I presume I'm not, of course. So we're a lot, and this is a giant screen. This is, a 40-foot screen. We're watching along, and there I am. And there is a crowd of like 300 people looking at me talking about the national parks. I just want to shrink down into your chair and slip out of that room. And then you see, oh, that wasn't so bad. I mean, I wish I could do it over, but that wasn't so bad. And then 2 minutes go by. Oh, there I am again. And then I realize I'm a real presence in these first 3 episodes of this film. And then you swell up like a snake. Oh my goodness! Look at me. I'm Shelby Foote. I'm the star. Look at me, and you start to think this. Hollywood will be calling, and agents will be seeking. Every documentary maker in the world will want me. I'll be at book contracts. There'll be limousines. I'll have groupies.
You didn't really think that.
No, but you do have a little feeling like
point
wow,
made. Yes.
Wow. Well, then, so I did those, and then I got to do the Roosevelts. I actually suggested the Roosevelts, not that he wouldn't have done it on his own, but he said, that's been done. And I said, no. I was thinking of Theo, the 26th president. He's much more interested in Franklin and Eleanor, but they all wound up in the film. And there again, I was a historical advisor plus a talking head, and I got a big place in the first couple of episodes of that film. All right, so then I think, okay, I've been in 3.5 Ken Burns films. He's doing one on Vietnam. I could talk about that, but I'm not a Vietnam scholar. He's doing country music. you know how little I know about country music. So you think, okay, I've done what I'm going to get to do with Ken Burns.
He made you
On.
run. Yeah.
That's it. I've exhausted my capacity to be useful.
But somewhere you knew better.
No, I didn't. So then I ran into him at an event last year, and he said, I think I want to interview you for this thing I'm doing on Benjamin Franklin. And I said, okay. Because you never just say, I don't know anything about this.
Well, you do, though.
So now, but here's the reason I even wanted it. Now we're like 22 minutes in, and I'm finally getting to my point. How do you prepare?
25, but who's
How do you
counting?
prepare? So I know a fair amount about Benjamin Franklin, but it's not enough to know that. You have to know it. You have to know facts, because this is film. This isn't ephemera. This isn't even radio. This is film. If this, first of all, if you're not factual, it probably doesn't get in. If it sneaks in and a Franklin scholar sees it, they may denounce you as having wrecked Ken Burns' film, and then that's on him, not me. So you have to get it right, and you have to know the stories, and you have to think about it. And so how do you do it?
You know a great deal about Franklin, and I know that's true because of the show, but you're saying it has to be at the level of your knowledge about Jefferson.
We've got to take it way up.
Yeah.
Way up. And you can't afford to screw up. And you don't know what he's going to ask. And I heard that he's already interviewed 11 people. So I know some of them. Gordon Wood, H.W. Brands. I mean, they're the cream of the American historiographical world. And so I actually was on the phone with one of his producers last week, and I said, why do you want me? And he said, well, you tell these. We've gotten some of these important stories from these very serious biographers and scholars, but they don't always tell them very well. They're academics. They trip on the density of the detail.
So I'm guessing it's, I was going to say earlier and then I forgot, is that, to take this whole conversation down to one simple subject, what we're talking about is the ancient art of storytelling.
Absolutely. That's all it's about.
And so because you've done documentaries and the whole Jefferson thing, I mean, you become practiced as a storyteller.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, Ken Burns gave me the best advice I've ever received after the second film. He said, you want to be in my films, you stick the landing.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that.
You need to be able to say the thing you're going to say and then stop, full stop, period.
Yeah, see, and your problem, if I can get personal, is that you have so much knowledge.
I want to say.
Rolling around your head that it's hard to stay on a certain story and not qualify it with all the other things you know.
So there are two things here. One is
a blessing and
you
a
want to
curse,
say everything you want to say.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if you're an academic, it's nuance plus digression plus shade of, you have, an academic never just says Franklin was a great man. An academic says, well, when you think about great men, you have to decide first what greatness is. And I mean, men means different things in different eras. And so that suddenly they're out of the film. So you stick the landing. The second thing is my debt of gratitude to you.
Really?
Because when we make documentary films, I had never done one until you and I did one on former governor of North Dakota, Arthur A. Link. Now you're on the other side of the camera, and now you're on the other side of the editing booth. And you realize, I have to have a usable thing. I have to have a usable statement. I have to have a story that's well told. I have to decide whether one person tells it or two or three people tell it. I have to decide how much is narrative and how much is talking head. So when you start to think like a filmmaker, you see it in an entirely different way. It's a whole different lens.
Yeah.
And so that has helped me because I know
that's a whole new set of
when I'm in there
power.
When you and I are interviewing somebody, even somebody really outstanding like, say, Jim Fugly or Mike Jacobs, these people that really know how to nail it, you're listening to them talk and you think, I can't use that, and I can't use that, and he's drifting off, and I'm not going to be able to use that. And then you think, that I can use. And so it's different from the truth. It's what you can use that's true, which is a very, very different thing. So I've learned those lessons. So now I know, for example, one of the stories they want me to tell is the story of the time that Adams and Franklin slept in the same bed.
Oh,
you know that story.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, but you couldn't tell it because we both know it, but we can't tell it, David. That's what I'm talking about. And so I've been going over it. Today I had to make a drive out into the countryside, and all the way out and all the way back I told these stories out loud because I'm trying to nail them. So here's what we know. I couldn't have said this yesterday. It's September of 1776. Adams and Franklin are called to Staten Island to meet with Admiral Howe about maybe negotiating an end of the conflict. It's very early on. They wind up at this inn in New Brunswick, or is it Brunswick? See, I've got to figure that out now tonight. I think it's New Brunswick in New Jersey. And the inn only has this one room for them, and they have to wind up sleeping in the same bed, which is not that unusual. But if you think about them, they're kind of Laurel and Hardy. They're not best friends, and they're both big. One's fat, one's huge. Franklin is a big boned 6 foot tall man, and Adams is a much smaller man, but he's rotund. And they're both characters. It's not like Jefferson and Madison, who are not characters. Both Adams and Franklin have these huge personalities, so it's automatically comic. And then they get into this dispute about the window. Should we leave the window open, or we should leave and Franklin goes into his theory of colds and pneumonia and his theory of cold air and so on. Anyway, so I've just told the story badly. That would never get into Ken Burns' film. Maybe a couple of little pieces of it he might have been able to use, but that would never get in. So by the time I sit down next week, I have to be able to tell this story succinctly, with complete sentences, with pauses after each sentence, with humor, with the right tone.
Brevity.
And it has to be accurate. There can't be a single error in it, or he'd have to cut around it, or maybe not use it at all.
Uh-huh.
And so here's how I've been preparing. First of all, in this case, I know some stories that I'm going to need to tell. I just know that. And I've made a list of them. And I've been going through books and hunting it out and then typing it all up. And then I write it out by hand because every time you do it, it gets a little deeper into your hard drive. And I've read three biographies of Franklin in the last week and taken extensive notes, which I'll type up now before I get into that.
We should do a Jefferson hour on
We
this.
will. And then I've been doing what I call one-pagers, where I type up the factual basis of a story, when it occurred, where it occurred, key phrases, all the details you just have to get right.
It sounds like you might be over-preparing.
Well, that's it. That's it, because I'm nervous.
Sometimes it's, to me, it's, with Franklin, it's more what people thought of him and how he allowed that than it is the facts.
Well, of course, but you have to do both, and so
yes.
My strength is I have two strengths. One is that I'm a pretty good storyteller, and the other strength I have is that I can pull back and try to draw a perspective. So I've been
and I think that's the valued one.
But you have to do both, and so if I told that story the way I would have told it last week, like they're somewhere on, I can't remember the year, but they're together, they're at an inn, they wind up in the same bed.
You've told that story
thing.
On the Jefferson Hour. I think you've done very well.
But you have to nail it.
Yeah.
And so I've read these 3 biographies and taken extensive notes, and then I've read 3 or 4 encyclopedia articles, because in the end, it's Wikipedia. In the end, you have to know what year the war was, and you have to know what year he was sent to London.
Well, part of it, too, for me, thinking about the body of work that this genius has produced, Ken Burns with Dayton Duncan and others, this is the history that people are going to remember 100 years from now, 50 years from now.
Or
In
at least 10.
I wish they would go back and remaster the Civil War. And they could do it because they've got the original film stock, because it was done in standard definition before high definition.
Yeah, but it's probably $1 million project.
So, I doubt it's $1 million. But in any event, where was I with that?
Well, just that. So this is how America learns its history. Is what you were saying.
And these films of Ken Burns. They're shown in schools. They're referenced, and they're going to be around for decades. And they're going to be. It's like writing a book.
And I could shame him by making a whopping historical error that he doesn't catch that winds up in the film.
Well, that's his responsibility.
And partly mine.
Yeah.
Because there's a level of trust here.
Yeah.
And
I can't imagine he has anybody in for interviews that he doesn't trust completely.
Then you can talk yourself into being too nervous to do it. So anyway,
that's not going to happen to you.
I've got a lot of work to do between now and next Friday, and I'll be every day.
You better go do it.
I'll be talking into the mirror. So then here's the final thing, David. You have to decide what you're going to wear. It's not radio where you're at this moment you're wearing a tuxedo and I'm wearing a rabbit costume. You have to decide what you're going to wear.
I guess you're right. Yeah. Nothing with checks.
Right. There's a whole set of things you don't wear.
Yeah.
But what's your look? Is it like a Carl Sagan look with a turtleneck? Is it a bow tie look like George Will? Is it
you
shabby genteel?
You might need to hire a handler.
I just want to brush my teeth.
Person.
So you got to think, well, how's my hair? And so when I won a big award once, and I was married then, and I said to my wife, I'm going to call home and I had to go to Washington D.C. to win this award, to get this award, and I said to my wife, I'm going to call home and tell my parents, and my father is going to say, this is tremendous. What an honor. Of course, we're coming. Just give us the details. And I said, my mother's going to say, oh, what will I wear? And my wife, who is a feminist, said, you pig. You disgusting, patriarchal, chauvinistic
Well, your
pig.
Mother might have arrived at that question at some point.
So I called home.
Really?
Home. And my father said, what a great honor. We'll go out for dinner. What can we do to celebrate? And I said, put Mother on. And I said, Mother, I won this award. You're coming to Washington, D.C. in June. She said, oh, what will I wear?
That may be a good place to end.
The reason I wanted to do this today.
You wanted a little practice, too.
Well, I haven't. You want to go through some of the stories?
No, saying it out loud. It helps.
It helps me to think about it. Because,
absolutely. Yeah.
But I also wanted to do it because then let's do one on the other end. When I come back,
absolutely,
with my tail between my legs, wishing that I were dead, wishing I'd never been born.
We may have to do that as a Jefferson Hour rather than a
Every time that I've been interviewed by Ken Burns, which is now 5 or 6 times, at the end of the interview, when they pull the mic off of me and they were about to order our tuna salad sandwich, I get down on my hands and knees and say, let me come back for a second interview. I know I'll get it right. I'll go away and study. Please, just throw this away. Let me come back and do it again. Please, oh, please, Ken. And he says, no, that's not how it works. And then you go away thinking, that's the last time I will ever see Ken
And
Burns.
then here it is happening again.
Well, we'll see. We'll see when Franklin comes out a year and a half or 2 years from now.
I'm thrilled to hear that he's doing Franklin.
And one last thing about Franklin. Please don't dispute me. I didn't really know Franklin. I knew Jefferson's Franklin, and I knew some things about Franklin. But now I really know Franklin a lot better. And he is a very difficult human being to make sense of.
Yeah.
A marvelous one. And I've been contrasting it with Jefferson, so we'll do that show. But we'll also do another one. But it's so interesting. So let me give you one very quick example. Franklin's in Paris, and he's watching hot air balloons when they're just brand new. They're just starting.
I know this story.
Yeah. And he is watching them, and there's a huge crowd, and they're having trouble with it, and it's drifting around. And somebody in the crowd says, interesting, but what good are they? What use are they? And Franklin says, what use is a baby? Isn't that great?
That is great.
See, and that's the epitome of Benjamin Franklin. Jefferson would have said, things often take some time to realize their potential, and there must be trial and error, and we begin, and we don't know.
He'd have gone academic.
He would have gone into a beautiful 2-page letter about the genius of invention and how we don't know where things are headed until they, and that trial and error is the stuff of human progress. It would have been a beautiful letter, maybe one of his best. It would be a national treasure, but Franklin just says, hey, what use is a baby? And he cuts through. That's what he's great at.
A unique mind.
It takes a special brain, and one that has a sense of humor, which Jefferson didn't have, to do that. But you see
and a self-assuredness,
there's a genius there.
Yeah, I always felt it was really self-assured that he really didn't care what other people thought.
So here's the thing. I'll make a little bet with you and our 1776 Club listeners.
All right.
When this film comes out, let's say 2 years from now, that story will be in it, and I will tell it.
Okay, that's good.
Because I'm going to tell that story.
I'm glad to hear your level of confidence.
With the pauses, with the timing, succinctly, with the contrast to Jefferson afterwards. And when you see the film, there's going to be a moment where Ken's trying to come to terms with what's the unique style of Franklin that made him what he was. And then you're going to see me wearing my Nehru jacket and a blue shirt, I think. And then you're going to hear that story, and there'll be this pause, and the punchline is, and Franklin said, what use is a baby? And then you're going to think, that's cool that he could predict that, because there's nothing else that I can predict that I'm going to say that's going to be in the film. I know that's going to be in the film.
That's great. So
1776 Club members hold me accountable.
You leave
at dawn tomorrow.
Oh, well.
I have to go to California first, and then I go to Walpole. I have 2 days, a day and a half at Walpole, New Hampshire, before I'm on camera, because there's a little gap in my travel schedule. And so that's great news, because I'll be in that hotel room saying, baby, balloon, hot air, not hydrogen, hot air, France, not Philadelphia. And I'll be going through those details and madly looking stuff up on the internet, and I'll have 4 or 5 books with me, and I'll be thinking, maybe I should go out and buy a suit,
Well, you could take a couple
Some
things.
teeth whitening.
You could take a couple things with you.
Maybe I get a haircut today, Maybe I just go home and not even do it. I'm not fit for this.
You suppose anybody is still listening?
Yes.
Good.
I think this is fascinating. And
I do too.
And I've learned so much by working with you in this way.
You're very kind.
No, it's true, because it's a whole different world behind the curtain.
Yeah, it's looking for those moments, and one of the proudest ones comes from that first project we did, and you know what it is.
I know you love darn good.
Yeah.
I'm less enamored of that, but it works for you.
Feels darn good. Well, I would just watch people
where he
reactions.
he reacts 30 some years later to a famous speech that he gave that was
that's all online. We can maybe put a link. That and our there's 2 or 3 that I think are online there.
So when I return, let's sit down again for the post-mortem.
Sure.
And then the 1776 Club members will be able to hear me say, I screwed it up. I'll never be in the film. Don't even bother. That was the worst day of my life.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
It's a date. Safe travels to you, sir.
Thank you, everyone.
And once again, thank you all of our supporters at the 1776 Club. We really do appreciate it more than you probably know.
Thank you, everyone.